Often considered one of the worst cars ever made, the Leyland Princess, much like the Austin Allegro and the Morris Marina, built itself a poor reputation early on due to its many design flaws, quality problems, and a confusing attempt at badge engineering that only served to harm the overall product, despite the fact that beneath the skin, the car provided technology that could have been truly market-beating. The story of the Princess begins in the late 1960s, when the then British Motor Corporation, or BMC, attempted to emulate the unparalleled comfort and sophistication of the pioneering hydraulic-based suspension system used by the French car builder Citroën. Hydropneumatic or oléopneumatique suspension was the brainchild of Citroën lead designer Paul Maget, and was predicated on the use of spheres filled with hydraulic fluid that would keep the car level through the compression of non-corrosive nitrogen gas trapped within the spheres. The result was a near-flawless ride quality that had soon become a staple of high-end and luxury cars across the world, initially being introduced on the 1954 Traction Avant 15H, before making a name for itself in the famous DS of 1955, in which nearly all systems within the car, including the suspension, power steering, brakes, gearbox and clutch, were powered by hydraulics. Its success took the motoring world by storm, and soon other major European car builders, including Rolls-Royce and Maserati, were implementing license-built versions of the Citroën system on their own models, perhaps its most famous application outside of Citroën being with the Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow, a factor that helped to make this the best-selling Rolls-Royce model of all time. BMC, however, felt they could go one step further by designing their own hydraulic suspension, this being dubbed hydrolastic suspension, which differed from the Citroën system by using alternate ingredients to form the hydraulic fluid, comprising instead of 49% alcohol, 49% distilled water, 1% triphenylamine phosphate, and 1% sodium mercaptobenzothiazole. Hydrolastic suspension was first implemented on the Austin 1100 and was fairly successful. But following the merger of the UK's main car builders to form British Leyland during 1968, the engineering team felt that the design could be improved, this time by exclusively using nitrogen gas to fill the hydraulic spheres, rather than an all-liquid, thus creating hydrogas suspension. The means for pressurizing the gas in the displacers was done by pre-pressurizing a hydraulic fluid and then connecting the displacer to its neighbor on the other axle, which, unlike the Citroën system, did not require the use of an engine-driven pump to keep the contents of the system continuously pressurized, with cars like the DS settling onto the ground when the system wasn't running. Subsequently, hydrogas was implemented on a variety of British Leyland products, starting with the Allegro in 1973, but when discussions were undertaken as to a possible replacement for the 11-year-old BMC ADO 17 range of large family cars, including the Austin and Morris 1800, the company intended to build a machine of similar size, but would be updated for the 1970s by including the addition of the hydrogas system. British Leyland's chief designer, Harris Mann, who had also penned the Allegro, was called in to design a futuristic machine that was largely reminiscent of the original Allegro concept drawings, this scheme coming under the name Diablo, with the car's appearance being nothing short of striking, with a long streamlined exterior dubbed the Wedge, being married to an ergonomic, intelligently planned interior for ease of use. However, Mann's optimistic ideas for what was now dubbed the Leyland 18 to 22 range of cars sadly never made it beyond the concept stage, as the management were quick to trim many of the revolutionary ideas down in order to fit within their increasingly small budget. The wedge design was gradually altered to make it look less streamlined and more blocky, but the egregious choice was the removal of Mann's original proposal to make the car a hatchback, with the final product instead being fitted with an impractically small boot, the rationale being that the company should only have one hatchback in their model range, with that space having already been filled by the Austin Maxi. Regardless, while Mann's ergonomic and sensible design was sacrificed on the altar of cost, the engines chosen for the 18 to 22 were appropriate enough, replacing the somewhat underpowered BMC B-Series engine from the Austin 1800 with several versions of the E-Series engine. The base model was fitted with the same 1.7-litre engine as the Allegro, while top-end models used a 2.2-litre unit from the Australian version of the 1800, the Austin Kimberley. The result on the 2.2-litre being a 0-60 time of 11.8 seconds and a top speed of 105 miles an hour, which was fairly standard performance for family cars of the time. However, confusion began as the car neared its launch, with the model being available under 3 of the marks that had been absorbed into British Leyland during the 1968 merger, resulting in the Morris 18-22, the Austin 18-22, and the Wolseley Saloon. Austin models differed from the Wolseley and Morris examples by the fitting of block headlights instead of quad-round headlights, and the lack of a large chrome grille and corresponding bonnet hump, while the Morris and Wolseley examples had alternate grille designs, neither of which suited the car's profile, the Wolseley Saloon being the luxury version of the car, fitted with velour upholstery, the traditional light-up Wolseley badge, and was only available with a 2.2-litre inline-6 engine. Nevertheless, this new range of cars entered sales in March 1975, but even before the first examples had arrived at the showroom, there were already significant problems. Production of the car being carried out at the former Morris factory of Cowley near Oxford, which had gained early notoriety for having among the most militant workforces. Ahead of the car's launch, a strike between January and February 1975 disrupted production for 4 weeks, while even after the strike had been resolved, build quality problems, especially with regard to the hydrogas spheres and pipework, meant the solution would often leak, giving the car a drunken lean that rendered it almost undrivable. Although early press reviews of the 18-22 were fairly warm, considering the car satisfactory at most but nothing particularly revolutionary, later criticism condemned almost every aspect of the range, including the styling, the performance, the pricing, and the needless use of badge engineering, which ultimately took away sales from the overall product. The car was notably slower than the comparative Ford Consul 2500L and the Fiat 132 GLS, and entered sales at £2,424 or £19,900 in 2024, while the rival Ford Cortina at base trim level had a retail price of £1,000 or £8,240 in 2024, and the high-end Ford Consul had a price range of £2,221 or £18,300 in 2024, though where the car did win was on fuel consumption, which stood at 26 miles per gallon, 6 miles per gallon more than the Consul. Regardless, production woes continued, starting on April 18, 1975, when only a month after launch, all production at Cowley came to a halt as 2,700 workers marched out on strike, the reasons being the management's decision to curtail production of the Morris Marina range by introducing a 4-day working week at some parts of the plant. The result was nearly 5,000 workers, both directly and indirectly employed by British Leyland, being sacked, and production of both the Marina and the 18-22 stopped for 4 days, while further strikes throughout mid-1975, including at the Dunlop factory in May and the BL Components Parts factory in July, only served to hamper both the quality of the car and its chances of selling in adequate numbers. The biggest issue hurting the 18-22 sales, though, was the badge engineering, this matter eventually forcing the company to unify Austin and Morris dealerships effective September 1975, which saw the discontinuation of both the 6-month-old Wolseley Saloon and the Wolseley brand itself, bringing an end to one of Britain's most cherished car marks. As for the 18-22 overall, this was renamed the Princess, available as the Princess 1800 and the Princess 2200, and while it's often believed that the car was sold as the Austin Princess, this was only the case for models sold in New Zealand in an official capacity. Sadly, the name change did nothing to solve the industrial action, and in October 1975, only 1 month after the launch of the Princess, 2,500 assembly workers were sacked after calling a 24-hour strike, while in November, following the installation of safety barriers, the complaint of just one man, who felt his work was being impeded by the presence of the barriers, resulted in 300 night shift workers being laid off. This, coupled with the car's poor reliability and build quality, saw its sales plummet within the space of only a few years, while attempts to reinvigorate interest through a 1978 facelift, with the car now being dubbed the Princess 2, failing to address any of the previous issues. Among the main problems was the fact that the car seemed to defy the rising trend for hatchback models, as was the case with the likes of the Volkswagen Golf and the Renault 5, the demand for such a fixture being so great that several independent mechanics had started a service to convert people's Princesses into the hatchbacks they were rightfully meant to be. A variety of other concepts also failed to make it to production, including the Vandenpla 2200, a luxury model fitted with a huge chrome nose, leather seats, walnut upholstery and rear picnic tables, and a sporty variant with a strange overall glass roof known as the Triplex 1020 glassback, but this was more a demonstrator vehicle for the then new Triplex safety glass. Once Sir Michael Edwards had risen to the rank of British Leyland chairman in 1977, he noted the Princess, together with the Allegro and the Marina, as a poor-performing model in need of replacement, and thus pushed forward with a new generation of family cars that would later come to fruition as the Metro, Maestro and Montego. However, as each of these cars was unlikely to be released until the early 1980s, the management chose to replace the Princess range with a facelifted version called the Austin Ambassador in 1981. This car differing from its predecessor through a larger body, revised front styling, a new selection of model variants, and the fitting of the much-desired hatchback to give it the practicality it deserved. However, the car's lack of refinement in internal equipment, combined with the ongoing issues of build quality and reliability, made it a sales catastrophe, and the Ambassador would keep the design alive until 1984, after which it was replaced by the Montego, putting an end to the 9-year-old 18 to 22 hydrogas range. Overall, the Leyland Princess, like many other British Leyland concepts, was one built with an interesting premise that was sadly eclipsed by the company's poor worker relations and misguided management that cut away many of the model's endearing features in order to save costs. In spite of the flaws endemic to the car itself, including its controversial styling, confusing use of badge engineering, and lack of a rear hatch, the build quality and reliability of the car is what truly sank the Princess range, and it was this, in the face of its revolutionary technology, that helped to cement the car's reputation as one of the worst in British automotive history.